Well, for whatever reason, Windows 11 just really doesn't like my microphone. I know you were talking about some microphone issues earlier. It's working. I can see it working as we speak.
And you've played it back, and your output is showing a quality recording, right?
Correct.
Okay, well then that's what we can expect as an audience when we put this together.
The stuff that's weird about it is like there's like a 30-ish% chance every time I turn my computer on that Windows forgets that the Yeti is connected to it.
Okay.
And I can't figure out why.
It sounds like a driver issue.
I would think so. I double-checked all the driver stuff, but I'm wondering maybe it's just like a compatibility thing, because I'm on a very old Yeti microphone at this point.
Oh, that's true. That's true.
So I'm wondering if it's just like something about the driver and Windows 11 are not particularly happy with each other. But it'll work if I unplug it and replug it in, like it will find it again. It's just very strange that it's not consistent in that way.
Well, I mean, for the purposes of this podcast, as long as you can record, then we're fine.
Exactly. And boy howdy, let me tell you, having a new computer has been nice. My old one was, getting old.
I want to hear about all the AAA games you've been playing, really using that new graphics card.
Yeah, well, before we talk about those...
Okay.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Audio Games Podcast. I'm Neil.
And I'm Matt.
And I have only really played one game that is pushing my card so far, is how I can put it.
Is it actually pushing it?
I would say it's at least a game that, like, is built for, hey, you have a fucking good card, we can do something with it. Like, we can actually turn on RTX ray tracing and shit, and it'll do something.
Okay.
And that game was Warhammer 40k Darktide.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Not a this year game or anything, but only about a year and a couple months, a little over a year old, I think.
Something like that.
Yeah, but that game is very extremely similar to Vermintide if you played any of those games, only with the 40k paint job on top of it instead of the fantasy one. It is a lot of fun, though. I've been mostly playing as the Zealot class, which is kind of the more melee-focused attacker rather than tank-style character.
Well, I mean, you're basically a Zealot in real life, so...
Oh, yeah?
that makes sense.
Okay.
You have a lot of
focus
zeal.
on... I tell you, I'm not sure I agree with you a lot of the time. I feel like sometimes I'm...
You just have a zest for life, Neil. You just a general zeal.
Oh, that's me. The zestiest. That zesty J. But this is a game I started playing in December with one of my buddies, just as like the two of us, because it's a fun multiplayer game.
Sure.
And so it's also the game where I was really able to see the jump in what my computer could handle before as to what my new computer can handle. Really the like big ones, because, mostly graphical. It wasn't like I couldn't play the game.
Mm-hmm.
But like the big ones really were just right off the bat going into the kind of hub that you can explore in the beginning. There was just like a shitload of volumetric, like, smoke and shit kind of permeating through this place, and little floaty particles all over the fucking certain rooms and stuff that just were not in my original playings of the game. All of that stuff was stripped out to make it run on my old computer.
Yeah, that I'm sure that kind of retroactively ruined that experience, didn't it?
No, it didn't
Not
ruin
having
it.
fog and particles and light shafts.
It didn't ruin it or anything. It made it very apparent how much compromising I was doing to continue running things on that old machine. But really the more interesting bits were like in play where, if a fiery barrel exploded and leaves a bunch of like flames on the ground and stuff, it looked fine before, but now it's lighting up that space in ways where like, oh, there were dudes hidden in shadows before that like either I didn't see or weren't really being hidden the way that they are on my new card with the way better lighting and ability to use that lighting.
Okay, well, what kind of monitor are you using?
An old one. That is unfortunately the bigger issue. I still need to upgrade my monitor, so there's a limit to what I'm able to push my card to do.
Okay, well, I mean, that's a perfect segue for me.
Yeah?
Because...
Did you get a new monitor?
No. Well, okay, so I don't have a new monitor, but I have something kind of similar that I did not put on our docket, so it's kind of blindsiding you, sorry.
It's okay.
But you reminded me of them, and they're basically this pair of glasses called the X-Rail Air glasses.
Oh.
And they're just these USB-C glasses. They don't have their own power supply. They drain power from whatever you plug them into, but they're basically a display that you wear on your face, kind of like VR, but it works with micro LEDs that reflect onto the surface, and then it's just whatever you're playing or whatever you're plugged into is just on your face. And oh my god, I am the laziest piece of shit when I have these things. I've been laying in bed playing on my Steam Deck. Sometimes, but it's also good for other things because, like, when I do my stationary bike, I'll plug it into my phone and I'll just watch YouTube and do my stationary.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
So like, most of my gaming has been literally pumped directly into my eye holes as I lay in bed playing on my Steam Deck. Like, I barely play things on my computer anymore. There's very few things that I play regularly that my Steam Deck can't handle. So, I have to forego my volumetrics.
You're fucking living in the future, though. Pumping that shit directly into your eyeballs? That's some cyberpunk shit right there.
It is some cyberpunk shit. You should play cyberpunk now that your computer can handle it.
I could. It's not on my short list right now, but
you don't like open world games.
Yeah, that is definitely a piece that keeps me away from it, to say the least.
Well, most games are open world now. That's why you need a new graphics card. You have to render the whole world. So you just get used to it, buddy.
It's so true. The being able to just like pump my draw distance and stuff. Some of that is actually more on the CPU side.
Sure.
But the CPU is actually where I've really seen the biggest, hey, my computer can fucking do things again.
Well, just to avoid getting into the meaty technical aspects.
Yeah.
The point is, you got a new computer, a whole new breadth of worlds is open to you.
So true.
At full visual quality. You are ready for the next generation of games.
Hell yeah, I am.
And you know what? It's we're at the end of February now, and we're starting to see some of the big games for this year starting to show up. I mean, nothing that I'm super particularly interested in, but I did watch the Nintendo Partner Direct, which is an ironic segue considering Nintendo games aren't on PC normally. But they showed a lot of interesting stuff. It was a Partner Direct, so not a lot of first-party content there, but there are a couple of things that I'm super excited for. And I was wondering if you happened to see it.
I did watch through that one. The big thing that I pulled out of it was really just the kind of follow-up from the Microsoft stuff the week prior.
Yeah.
Where a bunch of rumors came out going like, holy shit, Microsoft is going to become a third party, oh my god, and everyone freaking out. And it was not that big. Microsoft put out their own little... They called it a podcast, but fucking whatever. They
Yeah,
put
the
out their thing
weird
going like, hey,
presentation thing.
it was so weird. They put out their thing that was just like, hey, there's 4 games we're planning to do. Starfield and the upcoming Indiana Jones are not among them. And we are continuing to, like, we plan to continue supporting consoles in general. And then the follow-up was kind of like, okay, when we actually find out what some of those are, the first bit was this Nintendo thing where the first one they showed was Grounded as, like, the kickoff, which was like, okay, this game has been out for a while, sure, it's a multiplayer game, I get it.
It's not a game for the Switch, though. Like, I can already, like, just watching the demonstration stuff that they were showing, it's like, this is chugging.
And then the other game coming to Switch was funny, not because it's coming to Switch, but because it was just sort of buried in a, like, montage in the Nintendo Direct. It wasn't ever, like, explicitly, and this game is coming, and that was Pentiment, which makes a lot more sense on Switch.
Yeah, I mean, again, I played some of Pentiment on when I was trying out Xbox Game Pass for PC, and yeah, I think that's a perfectly fine pairing for the Switch. Not just because the Switch can handle it, but because it's the kind of game that benefits very heavily from being able to pick it up and put it down when you feel like it. Like when you play it on PC, and this has kind of like been my pratfall with how I ended up playing more on Steam Deck, but when you play on PC, it's kind of like a commitment. Like I know that we've come a long way and that like PCs boot way quicker, but like just going through the motions of like getting things set up, having the game running, getting everything together, and knowing that this is the only place that you can continue playing this game is it put a damper, we'll say, on a lot of like big, epic 100-hour games for me. I mean, I know that you have a little bit more patience for things like that, and part of that is because you stream a lot. But for me, I don't know. Like, I was hanging out with my girlfriend, and she got gifted Persona 3 Reload, the new Persona remake for 3.
Yeah.
And oh my god, were we getting so bored? I guess it's part of it is that we've played Persona 3. We already know the story beats. But we were so bored getting through that opening week. Because Persona games, they revolve around like these time-sensitive events. But like generally, Persona games take forever to actually get into the gameplay. And this is true of a lot of Japanese RPGs. Like most Final Fantasy games are the same way. But boy, I had my Steam Deck with me, and she was playing the game, and I was like trying to give attention to it, and just be present, I suppose. But I really just wanted to play what has ostensibly been my obsession for the past week, and that is a game called Balatro.
I have been hearing so much about this fucking game since the Steam Next Fest had a demo for it.
Bro, it is so good.
I've been hearing about it all over the place. I've been hearing about it so much that I did buy it.
Oh, you bought it?
I just haven't actually booted it up yet because I knew we were doing the podcast tonight, and I was committed to finishing a different game before the podcast. So that's what I spent my weekend with instead of trying out Balatro. But tell me about your experience with it, because this game sounds fucking great.
Yeah, so basically it's like Slay the Las Vegas Spire. It's like Solitaire on steroids. It was so fun that my girlfriend bought it, and she's put more hours into that than Persona 3 Reload.
Wow.
And I guess the main thing to say about it is it's essentially poker. And the way that it works is it's a deck builder, so that's why it's like Slay the Spire. But when you first start out, like the first runs you do, you have the standard 52 card deck, and you are given a certain amount of discards and a certain amount of hands that you can play to try and meet a score goal for a round. And so there's no monsters that you're fighting necessarily, and there's no like real action of the game. It's literally just a card game. But the thing that gives it a lot of nuance is that there are these other aspects that play into it. And these are the jokers, which are cards that you can add as like passive effects to how your hands play or how certain interactions happen. And all these card modifiers that come through these booster packs that you can buy in between rounds. And those are Arcana cards, which are tarot cards, the Celestial cards, which are planet cards, and the I think it's the Spectral. Yeah, it's Spectral cards, which are kind of like, wild card miscellaneous effects. But you can basically take cards in your deck and modify them, not just changing their suits or their ranks, but also just giving them weird like attributes, kind of like how random loot drops in a loot game would have like modifiers in them. So you can make a ace of spades a lucky ace of spades, and then it has a 1 in 4 chance of adding a 20 times multiplier to that hand score, right? And so there's this layers and layers of strategy and interaction that just have robbed me of so much time. Just so much time, Neil.
So, I know it's like based on poker hands.
Yes.
But the score you're getting on a hand, what does that actually translate to then? Is that like...
Okay, well, let me explain.
Yeah.
So if you just play a flat hand, let's say like you want to do a flush, right? Mm-hmm. So it's 5 of the same suit. The way that it is scored is based on that poker hand's level. So a flush has a level that's attributed to it when you start the run, and that's level 1. But you can level up a flush. If you are building a deck that does a lot of flushes, then it's good to open up your Celestial packs when you find them and try and find Jupiter cards, because Jupiter is the Celestial card that levels up a flush. Okay?
Okay.
And so the base score for a flush is like, it comes with a multiplier aspect and a chip aspect. Chips are like points. So you would say that it has a base of 60 chips and a multiplier of 4, right? So that's the base score for a flush at level 1.
Sure.
I'm not actually sure if that's true. That's just going off the top of my head. If you level it up, it gets like 30 chips and an additional 2 multiplier, right? But then also, what cards you actually play to make up the hand affect that as well. So those use blackjack style point coverage. So aces are 11, face cards and 10s are 10 points, and then the other ranks are equal to the rank that they are. So
right,
you have...
But are you needing to beat a certain point threshold to progress, or is it like...
Yes, so so the game is made up of antes. So
okay.
So you have the first ante, and that includes 3 blinds. So the small blind, the big blind, and then the boss blind. And so the small blind is typically like the lower value, and you can skip both the small and the big blind. And there's a reward you associate with skipping these blinds, and that's called a chip. Now, you don't get a shop if you don't complete the blind, so you're also missing out on a shop. So there's a lot of choices that you make as you're progressing through your antes. A standard game has 9 antes, so you go through 9 rounds. But each goal, each benchmark that you have to hit increases every time. But there's also like voucher cards that like reduce your ante. So yeah, there's just a lot of things to interact with. I don't really want to spoil too much because there's a lot to discover in this game.
That's fair.
But just know that it's going to be kind of a shame that you're going to be playing so much of it, Neil, considering you just bought a new computer. It is not a demanding game. I actually floated the idea to my girlfriend. I was like, if Microsoft really wanted to like do something cool, they should just include this game with like the next version of Windows, like the new Solitaire.
Wow.
Can you imagine?
I can't imagine, but that would be a big jump for basically any game to suddenly
but
just be included in Windows.
well, sure. I mean, they used to do that all the time, right?
Yeah, man, Space Cadet Pinball is burned into
Yeah,
my head
man.
forever.
People still love Space Cadet Pinball, but they also have, like, the Microsoft Entertainment Pack, right? I think
Yeah,
that
I'm just thinking, like, as far as if you were an indie developer and you made this game and the Microsoft was like, hey, we want to give you Lord knows how much fucking money to just have this in Windows forever, is like, holy shit.
well, I mean, they already have, like, such a big library of games available through Xbox,
I guess that's true,
right?
yeah. Windows
Like-
could really just go pretty wild with that shit these days.
And
if
it's not like
wanted.
they haven't. It's not like they haven't been, like, I mean, relatively generous with how Game Pass works.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. I just feel like it's time for Windows to have, like, a new game, and I feel like this would be, like, the perfect kind of sequel to just all those solitaire games.
Wild.
It's fun.
I mean, it sounds like it must be. I really look forward to checking it out. I was gonna boot it up probably in like a couple days, but maybe I'll, depending on how my night goes, maybe I'll try to just actually check it out a little bit tonight.
Yeah.
We'll see. We'll see.
The other thing I do want to warn you about Balatro is that it has one song.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, if you're playing a really good run, you're probably going to be listening to this one song for like an hour and a half. And if you're like me and you want to do like 3 or 4 runs without stopping, you end up listening to this song for like 6 hours.
Well, I hope it's a really good song.
It's not a bad song. It's catchy, but it's also kind of generic. But boy, is it just burned into my brain at this point. Like, at one point, I just
boy.
turned off the music so I could just listen to something else in the background.
Honestly, depending on how this game goes, because you mentioned Slay the Spire earlier. Slay the Spire is a game that every once in a while I boot up and like play while I'm watching some other YouTube videos and stuff that I'm not necessarily paying full attention to, and maybe this game will be really good to be a new one of those for me.
Could be.
Could be.
All right, well, I think that you have been playing other games, right?
I have been.
But
really,
I think that
really
you
just... Go ahead.
I was just going to say, you had openly admitted that you've only played one game that really tested your system.
True.
So I'm guessing that this other one is kind of not doing that then.
No. The other game I played was called Everhood. I don't know if you heard about this game. I think it's 2.5, maybe 3 years old at this point.
It's like about 3 years old, yeah. That's like the RPG rhythm game, right?
Yeah.
Kind of
RPG
rhythm-y.
doesn't quite fit. So this
You
game...
play a role in the game.
Yes, but what this game actually kind of ends up being a lot more is... It's kind of like... It's actually a lot like Undertale.
Okay, here we go.
I know. Except with, instead of like your combat being the kind of like dodging in a little box, the projectiles, right? You're kind of like playing audio surf.
Or you could imagine it as a Guitar Hero fretboard.
Yes, you could, only you're trying to avoid most of the things a lot of the time.
Yeah.
The reason I say Undertale vibes, though, is not just because when you look at the art style and stuff, you can kind of go like, oh, these people were probably inspired a little bit. I think these people were inspired quite a bit, in particular with some of the ways that they attempt to do the writing of various characters, and actually kind of the main story in a lot of ways feels like you can sort of view it as a response to Undertale.
Elaborate.
Yes. So Undertale, in a lot of ways, is kind of a story about exploring this world and finding out, like, hey, these aren't just monsters, these are people, these are characters, and it really pushes you about your choices, to think about what those mean, what those are, and kind of pushes you towards, hey, all that stuff at the beginning about showing mercy is something you should pay attention to and try to live in this game with. This game goes in a pretty different direction where it's playing in a lot of the same...
It's good to die.
Yes and no.
Yeah, I know.
It's playing in a lot of the same vibes with trying to make characters feel like people, trying to be quirky in a lot of those same similar ways. But it is also telling a story that right from the very get-go is talking about, like, hey, to play this game, you need to give up your humanity and embrace immortality. Will you do that? And you have to say yes, or the game just kind of doesn't really start. And then the entire world kind of ends up being this place with a bunch of immortals in it. And at least some characters telling you, like, this world needs to die because immortality is its own curse. And so you can definitely, when you especially hit the second half of the game, you run into a lot of things that can very much feel like this is a response to Undertale encouraging friendliness and pacifism and stuff like that, in a way that this game frankly gets kind of mad at you for doing, in a way that I'm not really sure I super gel with, but I don't think they did a bad job with what they were trying to do, just it doesn't resonate for me. Just a little on the nose. A little on the nose, and it just doesn't really resonate the way that Undertale did. And part of that does come down to, yes, it has a lot of these, especially in the writing, trying to be similar to Undertale and, like, have quirkiness and make characters. I don't think it really succeeds near as well as Undertale did in a lot of those ways. A very interesting game. Frankly, the combat, quote-unquote, is, I think, maybe harder than it needs to be for a lot of the game. There's a lot of difficulty levels. I ended up playing it on normal because the default is hard, and after, like, 20 minutes, I was like, this isn't going to be worth it. I'm not banging my fucking head against this game for this. Okay. And I still ended up banging my head a little bit because the game gets fucking hard.
Yeah. No, I've definitely seen a fair amount of that game.
Oh, okay. Yeah. It's an interesting game. I played it in part because I'd been interested in it when it was new and just didn't find the time. And then a friend of mine actually messaged me one day going like, hey, if you haven't played this game, you should check it out. It's really cool. I enjoyed it a lot more. I think you would like it too. And I was like, okay, like, it's getting on the back burner, and eventually only took another, like, year or something since that suggestion for me to get around to it. And I don't think I wasted my time or anything. It was only 5 or 6 hours long for me. So
yeah,
still enjoyable.
Okay, well, just based on my own experiences with Everhood, what I will say is that I feel like they had a concept that they cemented. You know, they knew they wanted to make a game that was telling a story about, like, where it's important to, like, have people move on, right? But in doing so and developing it in this quirky nature, it kind of, I don't know, I feel like it didn't match the narrative.
Yes. And I think I agree with you on a lot of that. That's part of why I think the writing is kind of where it fails, because it's not necessarily the message of the game that is bad or delivered badly. It's just that the writing doesn't quite support it to make it feel impactful in the way that Undertale did.
Yeah. And, like, if you're not paying, like, close attention, it's just, you don't really understand what you're doing and why. Like, the game doesn't do a good... Well, I know it's trying to be ambiguous on purpose, right?
Yeah.
But that ambiguity takes away from the message.
Yeah.
It's one of those things like, oh, look, it turns out you're actually not bad. It's like, oh, thanks. It would have been great to like have a better understanding of what I was doing to begin with, instead of playing it all cryptic and then giving me this sigh of relief at the end. Oh, I'm not actually bad.
Yeah, and it's really strange because they do have a lot of things telling you you're doing the right thing, you're not bad as you're doing this stuff. But they also do a lot of things with like the way they
make it seem like it is bad.
Yes, like they change the color of your interface after you've done some amount of these things in a way that makes it feel like, oh, you are going down like the evil path, in the way that a lot of games have taken this kind of idea of good and bad morality and like tried to cement that. And I know, again, Undertale does a lot of that too, but I think Undertale, when it pulls the rug, pulls it in a way that is way more satisfying than the way this game ended up doing it. And
yeah,
maybe part of that is because they are, in a sense, chasing Undertale. That's part of why I'm saying like this game feels like it is easy, at least, to think of it almost like a response to Undertale, and just not as fleshed out in the way that you might want it to be because of that.
Yeah. It's kind of like if you're playing an Earthbound inspired game, there's going to be like a fat bald man who's probably actually very helpful, even if he doesn't seem like he's helpful. It's just a trope.
Yeah. And Lord knows, there's some pretty silly fat men in Day of the Diver, which you've been continuing to play, huh?
I mean, yes. I don't see him for that alone, but that is a quality that both Dave and several other characters have. Yeah, it's expanded quite a bit. The gameplay loop is still the same, but they didn't add it, but I've gotten to the point where you experience a day-night cycle. There's an expanded weapons modification thing going on. There's a lot more of like management of the restaurant with like how you hire people and train them. So, I mean, it's just a very good A side, B side kind of like small but like very well done game.
Well, I'm glad to hear that they expanded a bit on some of that stuff, because I remember last time we said this game might be longer than expected, and I'm glad that they're still adding things to keep it fresh instead of getting a little stale with how long it might be.
Yeah, I mean, I still think there's plenty of stuff that I haven't accessed at this point, but as far as like systems go, I think that I've pretty much unlocked everything that's going to grow with the rest of the game, so I have a good idea of like what I'm dealing with. But boy, am I playing Balatro. Which, by the way, I believe is ancient Roman for fool.
Is it? I didn't know that.
Yeah, because it's playing on the idea that you're playing with jokers.
Well, as much as Balatro might be the game you've been spending all your time with,
let's talk about Balatro more.
I can't. I gotta boot it up and try it myself before I can say much more about it.
You have other games you need to boot up and play yourself too.
I do. I have a whole list of them.
You had a birthday recently, and you probably got a bunch of stuff.
I did. Well, I got a few things. Balatro was one of them.
Okay.
No, I picked up like the Street Fighter DLC because Ed's coming out soon. I want to actually play Ed. And, Capcom Cup was this weekend, so...
Yes. In fact, I just finished watching it.
Yeah. Yeah, what did you end up thinking? Because you watched a lot more of it than I did. I only sort of half-watched the top 8, and even then, only really the grand finals is the part I sat down and watched, but...
Yeah, so I've been watching a lot of Street Fighter 6 over the past couple of weekends because While we're recording on this weekend in Capcom Cup 10 / Capcom Cup X, depending on naming conventions for Capcom, happened now. They had the last chance qualifiers for Capcom Cup last weekend. And, boy, is there a lot of JP and Luke.
Yeah.
Like, I got real bored of watching Luke and JP. And the thing is, you had Luke in the finals, the grand finals of Capcom Cup. All right, that's fine. But for all of that JP playing that happened across these 2 weekends, there actually wasn't a lot of JP representation in the top 16. And I think a large part of that is when a character is so ridiculously popular and so top tier and played by everybody, when you're playing at the highest of high levels, then yeah, people are going to know how to deal with that, right?
Yeah, that's the character that everybody builds an actual game plan around.
Well, I mean,
whether or not
you would expect experts to build game plans around all of the characters, but like obviously they're going to know how to fight JP because they're online playing all the time and going to locals, and every other person they're fighting is JP. It's like, well, then yeah, I know how to fight JP. So, I don't know. I think that there's kind of like this issue with the whole idea of a tier system for fighting games, because the character who won is Jury. You know, a relatively unknown player named Uma, who clawed his way through several events to get enough points to qualify for the Capcom Cup, went all the way. And the cool thing about Capcom Cup 10 is that this is like the biggest prize they've ever offered for a fighting game. And it was $1 million, which is humongous if you compare them to payouts for literally any other fighting game event.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're looking at like your League of Legends or Dota stuff, like this is not that impressive, okay?
Yeah, sure.
Like
those games have been doing millions for decades at this point, but
and I think that's ridiculous. But you know, for a fighting game, this is like has been the event. And I know that we're really big Evo people. We love Evo. I mean, there's a spectacle that comes with Evo. But just in terms of raw statistics, this is the biggest prize that anyone's ever gotten. And it went to someone that I don't even know who he is. But by God, he plays a mean Jury. And Jury is not a top-tier character. They were talking about this, the commentators. Basically, she's like maybe top 10 characters in a roster of not that many characters right now. But yeah, I think that when you look at upsets and you look at events for fighting games and you have like these underdog low tier characters come and create upsets, I do think there is a factor there where it's just like people just don't know how to deal with them. I mean, look what Hakan did at Evo.
Sure. I'm a little surprised to hear about like Jury not being particularly high. I feel like, admittedly, I haven't been paying super close attention to a lot of Street Fighter 6 stuff lately, but in my recollection, like Jury was at least in contention for top 5 for most of its life, just because she has a lot of the pieces that people think are good. A drive rush that goes really far and is really fast. A fireball of some kind that you can follow with especially drive rush. Yeah, she might not have the same kind of just I'm plus because I want it situations that like Ken or someone does, but I thought she was always considered to be pretty dang good.
I mean, she's top 10, and so she's in the upper half of like I think a roster. I think there's 20 characters, right?
They're close to that at this point, if not just above at this point. Yeah.
But I think that if you're talking top tier, you have Luke at the top. Then it's like JP and Ken probably like tied. DJ's up there. Like he's got a mean mean set of moves.
Yeah.
And then I'd say Guile, just because he's just so reliable. And then maybe Jury and Cammy around the same area, and then Rashid, who also had a very good showing at Capcom Cup.
The game has only had 2 DLC characters so far, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, Aki had 0 players that made it into the Capcom Cup, and Rashid had a handful, one of which made it very far.
Yes. It'd be nice to see an Aki player at a tournament. I'd like to... I imagine she's not high tier, that's why you're not seeing her. But for the same reason, I imagine people would just not know how to deal with her.
True. I will admit a small part of me was not paying super close attention to Capcom Cup, in part because the character that I currently main was not being represented. Not that I need my character to be there. It's not like, oh, my character's making it to grand finals. That's what I'm watching for, or anything like that. But it is very exciting to at least be able to see, like, the character you like using represented in some way. That has definitely made an Evo or 2 in the past be exciting for me. I remember way back when, like, seeing Abel in grand finals was like, holy shit, someone's playing Abel. Like, that's awesome.
Okay, but, like, there's representation of, like, liking to see your main character, but there's also just characters that are fun to watch.
Yeah.
Like, I love watching a Zangief match. Just because I know the risks involved. It's like, oh, man. Every time you're, like, in that range, I'm like, oh, it's gonna happen.
And Lord knows, I don't think JP is very fun to watch, let alone play against.
Like, he's fun to watch the first 50 times, and then it's just like, he does the same fucking loops.
Yeah, he's fun to watch in that he can do some really cool, unique stuff compared to the rest of the cast. He's not fun to watch in that a lot of his most powerful situations feel the same every time.
Yeah, no, he's just... Because he's played so much, and because he's so high tier, he's been so optimized that when you watch any JP player, like, sure, they'll have, like, different tactics and techniques for, like, in the neutral, but the moment they land a hit and convert, it's like, I know exactly what's going to happen.
Yeah. I know that the combo is going to be level 2 into 3 different DIs to drain their bar. Like, yeah, it is unfortunate. That's part of what made watching some Guilty Gear harder for me. Not most recently, because some nerfs happened, but Happy Chaos just wasn't fun to watch.
No, he wasn't.
And he was so powerful, you would see Happy Chaos constantly anytime you're watching professional play. And it was just, yeah, it can be a damper.
I feel like they probably should have just banned him from tournament play. Like, if you can ban Bayonetta and Meta Knight from Smash Bros., just fucking ban Happy Chaos.
I feel like Smash Brothers is, like, the only place where people really end up doing hard bans like that. I can't think of any more non-platform fighters. I can't think of a platform fighter that has ever straight up banned a character.
Well, maybe they should have. Guilty Gear could have made a landmark decision.
I guess if you're thinking about some of those really old ones where, like, there are literally broken characters in them.
Yeah, it's just not balanced at all.
But those are kind of their own weird beast. So
pre-patching of video games.
Yeah.
Where they just fucked up real bad and made a broken character.
Yeah. But Capcom Cup was exciting. At least that grand final was pretty exciting. Watching Uma do some pretty wild shit, actually, in not just that game, but I think it was their match before that, where they, from way further than I thought they could, did a, like, drive rush into EX reversal to catch somebody doing a fireball in a way that was just like, holy shit, I can't believe you made it under that fireball and reached them. That's nuts.
Oh, yeah, the drive rush into the EX fire not fireball, but
The
like
spin
Jury's
kicks.
equivalent.
Yeah.
Yeah, it gives extra momentum, so it like makes them go further.
Yeah, it was from so far away, and when maybe my brain is misremembering this at this point, but I feel like it was if you miss this, you are literally dead. It was pretty wild.
Well, I mean, there was also a really great match where they threw the ground fireball, and it traveled slowly towards someone who's in the middle of their critical art.
Oh no.
And like, Jury was getting blasted, but like, before the last hit could land, the fireball just hit the other character and killed them.
Oh my god, I didn't see that one, but that's so ridiculous.
Oh, you're probably gonna see highlights of that one.
Yeah.
Street Fighter's great.
Yes. I admittedly have some disappointments with what they've done to my boy Ed, but
okay.
When he actually comes out and I put my hands on him, hopefully I still think he's very fun.
Neil's gonna go modern.
I probably won't. I literally tried. I actually booted up the game and tried a little bit recently just because... I mean, I guess I haven't said it on the podcast. Ed in Street Fighter V was kind of like a prototype for what the modern controls in Street Fighter VI is. It's done in a different way, and a way that I think works a lot better for people like me, who happen to... Yes, I have a fight stick. I like playing on a fight stick. I'm not particularly good with the way that inputs work. Be it charge, I'm better at motion. But even then, having my left and right hands speak to each other and be smooth, even when I grind it out, I feel like there's a certain level of I never get particularly good at it. And Ed solved a lot of those problems in Street Fighter V for me because it meant I could separate my left and right hands a lot more for the way that combo structure and stuff worked. Modern theoretically would allow you to do that, but it is extremely awkward on a fight stick. The way the buttons and stuff are set up, even if you remap them, what they're asking you to do feels really bad on a fight stick. Modern is really built for a controller, just a regular gamepad. And that's fine, but that's not how I like engaging with fighting games. So I'm this weird person who's in this like kind of annoying middle ground where I want to use my fight stick because that's the way I like playing fighting games. And unfortunately, the character that they had built to really kind of fit the way that I can use that thing is getting changed in a way that is going to make it less satisfying for me personally. And I'm sure I'm not the only one like that, but obviously I am a minority. A lot more people are going to be gamepad players, and modern is fine for them, or going to be fight stick players who maybe they like Dead for other reasons. But
well, I mean, I feel like Street Fighter 6 is two different games, honestly, and the modern controls, like, you are forced to play them for a little bit in story mode, right? Like, you have to wait and get through, like, the opening tutorials and stuff, and then you can go into the menus and switch it back. And when you play story mode, you also realize it really was not made for a fight stick. Like, they cobbled together the most janky way of playing it, if you really wanted to play with a fight stick. But it's basically actively discouraging you. So, like, I feel like so many of the new players who engage with Street Fighter 6 just know modern controls. Like, that's just what they're familiar with. And then there's this whole separate game with, like, the classic controls that exists kind of, like, as an aside to that. And, you know, it's fine. I think that as far as, like, making it match, they did the best that they could. But really, when you are playing with modern controls and you switch to classic or vice versa, it's a different game.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I think that you'd basically be learning and playing a different game if you switched to modern and played with a gamepad. And, you know, it sounds like that's not the game you want to play.
Yeah. So, I'm still looking forward to Ed, though. He looks very cool.
So it's very edgy. He's the Shadow the Hedgehog
He sure
of
is.
Street Fighter 6.
I am very happy that they at least updated his look a bit, because frankly, especially his like base skin in Street Fighter V was doofy and stupid.
I still think he looks like a dweeb.
He does still look kind of dweeby, but boy howdy, that fucking like little triangle dumb hat on top of his like covering one eye haircut in 5 looked so fucking stupid. There's a reason I never used his base skin in that game. But they made him look a lot better in 6, I think, just aesthetically. But the character is still definitely a fucking edgelord. Most
characters gotta glow up in Street Fighter 6.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it would be really funny if they just left him looking the same.
Yeah.
Showing up in his little triangle hat. Hey guys, I'm here. I'm the perfect life form.
Oh boy, but that's not the only little bit of stuff we kind of saw out in the world lately. The Elden Ring DLC, 2 years after the release, they finally put out a trailer.
2 years?
Yeah, it was like
Good
February.
Lord.
I think it was like my birthday game, basically, 2 years ago.
Wow.
I know. Crazy. But the DLC, they put out an actual trailer for it.
Yeah,
and
Shadows of the Erd Tree.
Yeah. I will say, it looks like more Elden Ring.
It looks very Elden Ring, I do admit.
It looks so extremely Elden Ring.
Like, if you've played Elden Ring, and you saw this trailer, you'd be like, that's Elden Ring, and you would be right. Because it's more Elden Ring.
Yeah.
Though, so here's what I have to say about download content and FromSoft games. They don't miss. They just have such a good track record for creating some of the best content post-release for a game, and then, you have to pay for it, but I don't think I've ever heard of someone saying, I didn't really like the Dark Souls 3 download content. I didn't like the Dark Souls 2 download content. I mean, I didn't like Dark Souls 2, but I like the download content. So, I expect that this has been cooking for a while, and it will be good.
I was less positive about Elden Ring than a lot of people. I don't think it's a bad game. We've been over it. But I will say the trailer didn't hit for me the way that I think it's hitting for a lot of people, in part because to me saying, oh, it's more Elden Ring is kind of like saying, boy, that game was already fucking huge. There's a part of me that's almost worried, like, is it just gonna be another absolutely fucking gigantic landmass and too much more than I personally want? Who knows?
Could you imagine walking into a buffet and being like, you really expect me to eat all this? That's what I feel like you're doing.
That's how I feel. There's too much. That game is already too big.
You don't walk into a buffet and complain about how much food there is, Neil. If you don't want to engage with it that much, then just eat what you want and move on.
I suppose so. I'm still probably going to pick it up. It'll be interesting, at the very least, for me to... Like, I've debated reinstalling Elden Ring and playing with it a little bit just to see, like, hey, remember how I had more trouble with parries in this game than any other FromSoft game I've ever played?
You're going to blame your graphics card?
Well, at the time I was on a 970, but my computer was running it on low settings, 720, 30 frames a second, and struggling to stream it at the same time.
Well, there you go, Neil. I think that might be a little bit of a contribution to why you didn't like Elden Ring.
There's a possibility that I was having more issues with it than other FromSoft games, in part because of computer issues. I'm willing to admit that. I feel like I admitted that before, too. I still played through that entire fucking game that way, so they couldn't have been issues that were bad enough to stop me from playing the game, right? Like, I don't know.
Well,
anyway.
You'll have your chance in the shadow of the Erd tree.
Indeed. Indeed. Other than that, I think there's just one more thing I want to make sure to hit, because apologies, everyone. And I will be the one who takes the brunt of this, because I feel like it is on me.
What a champ. Wow. Like you had to say that.
I'm
I'm so noble for taking the blame for this.
People to email us at audiogamespodcast@gmail.com with questions and comments, and being a brand new podcast, all that stuff, I forgot to actually check the email on our last podcast.
Oh, darn.
And we did have one little question in here that was just from R, is all they put in this.
Okay.
Hey, next podcast, can you let us know the buzz, if any, on the Brothers Tale of Two Sons reboot? I haven't really seen a lot of buzz, but thank you for the email. I can tell you a little bit about what I've seen about this. I haven't seen a lot of buzz about it. From what I can gather, it's coming out actually like this week, basically, and they are just remaking the game in Unreal 5. I'm sure it's going to look a lot better. It'll probably run well for modern machines. That's all good. Honestly, the thing that it looks like they're adding that I am personally like, why would you do that? Is they are adding a multiplayer mode to that game. I know.
What?
I know. And I think that game is wonderful. In large part because of the way that it specifically tells the story mechanically. And without spoiling anything, if two people are playing different characters in that game, I don't think the end is going to hit the same way.
Yeah.
There's no other way of putting it. Obviously, you don't have to engage with the game that way. I'm sure it'll still play just like it always did, as a great, wonderful single-player experience. But that is just a confusing addition to me. That is kind of the one big new thing outside of a graphical overhaul, from what I understand.
That'd be like remaking Avatar: The Last Airbender and just being like, Aang can fly now. He doesn't need a glider.
Somebody's been watching Netflix.
I actually haven't. I've just been listening to all the complaints.
Yeah, fair. Me either. I don't plan to watch it, but I saw that one too.
I don't have any attachment to Avatar, so... But both the blue people and the martial arts one.
You don't want a tentacle hookup before coitus?
Listen, I'm all for that, but it doesn't have to be an Avatar thing.
Alright, fair enough.
In fact, I mean, I'm not going to disclose too much details, but maybe that's already been a thing without it being Avatar. Anyway,
oh boy. Well,
here's my news story. Actually, I have a news story and a recommendation, if I may.
Sure.
My news story is Pal World has dropped off a lot.
Yeah.
Steep player drop off. It peaked at around 2 million players concurrently. Now it's averaging about 300,000, which is like a loss of more than 1.5 million. And then the response from the developers is, that's fine. You know why that's fine for the developers? Because you already paid them your money.
They made their money.
Yeah. Now they have less people they have to try and please.
Also, to be fair, I'm pretty sure that like the 300-ish thousand concurrents still has them in like the top 5 to 10 of Steam.
Sure.
Which means they're still doing pretty fucking well.
Right, and I think... So let's quantify that, though, because when we talk about doing well, what we're talking about is the statistics, right? We're talking about the numbers behind that. But the thing that drove Palworld into the spotlight and had so many people enthralled by it for its brief moment was that it was a phenomenon. It wasn't a good game. Okay? Let's be clear here. There's no list out there that's going to be saying Power World Game of the Year 2024. There's just not. It's not going to happen. And if it does, I will laugh at that publication. Because that's a horrible take. And then my recommendation is, I watched a really interesting video about gender wars in gacha games. Just to give you like the most truncated like synopsis, there was a gacha game created by a small company that didn't normally do gacha games, but like there was a demand for it.
Sure.
And they're known for being like not fan servicey. Like they do anime style games, but they're not about fan service. They don't like fan service. But when the gacha game came out, spring came around, or not spring, summer came around, and like it's traditional in gacha games for whatever godforsaken reason to release like swimsuit editions of characters. And so like, okay, we'll release a swimsuit edition of this guy character and this girl character. Mm-hmm. And people like the depraved gacha gamers of the world were expecting like some fan servicey thing, but the company stuck to their guns. And the character's name is Ishmael. I know that specifically because it was a Moby Dick reference. But she's wearing like her swimsuit is like a wetsuit. And, like, sure, you can, like, construe that to be, like, a sexy thing, but it's not. It's just not presented in a erotic fashion. And people went batshit. They were like, this is a joke. How dare you? It's, like, weird entitlement for, like, what a, like, character should be wearing in a game, okay? And so, that's, like, the basis of, like, what the video is. But then, like, it transitions to, like, talking about the gender politics of Korea. And then it does a history thing where they go back even further and talk about Confucianism and, like, how it was introduced to Korea. And then how it became Neo-Confucianism. And, like, the importance of, like, roles. And how Korea, like, beneath the thin veneer of pop culture is very much even stricter about, like, roles and the family than China. And it's a very, very in-depth video. It's from a channel on YouTube called Moon Channel, and it's a 2-part series. It's very long, but it was super interesting. Just talking about, like, how gacha games are and how the people who play them are and how Korea is, and it's crazy.
Well, as a gacha enthusiast like yourself, do you
That's
agree
me.
with a lot of what it was saying?
Oh, absolutely. There's just some insane things that, like, upset gacha people have done. Like they went to the studio and like barricaded it.
Oh my god, no.
And then they wanted to like martyr like a female artist on the staff because they said she must be the one who prevented us from having a sexy swimsuit on the character.
Oh, fuck off.
It's really, really crazy, but it's also a very interesting story, and the way that Moon Channel kind of segues between like how this came to be and like the modern manifestations of a lot of historical things is like really interesting. So I recommend it. That's my recommendation.
Well, okay then.
Do you have a recommendation for media?
I mean, I've been fucking all over telling people to watch Freerun for fucking ever at this point. It's so good.
Which what?
Freerun?
Freerun.
Yeah,
the anime.
The anime, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's cool.
I know I've said that one before, so yeah. If you haven't watched that, fucking check it out. It's great. That's my suggestion.
Okay, well, we're at an hour here.
Yeah, thanks everybody.
I just noticed. I guess it's too late for me to talk about Toy Story.
Audio Games is hosted and produced by Matthew Lane and Neil Jimenez. Our theme music is Recharging by Gooset. If you'd like to reach out to us, please email us at audiogamespodcast@gmail.com. Alright, tell me about Toy Story.
I rewatched Toy Story 1 through 3.
Okay.
Toy Story 1, it holds up. It was darker than I remembered it being.
Sure.
The way that Sid murders toys is like actually gruesome.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I didn't think about it as much when I was a kid because I probably did similar shit.
Sure.
Toy Story 2, best Toy Story. Lots of character development, expanded world, interesting use of like established things. I liked it. Toy Story 3, what the fuck? That shit's dark.
I only remember the end of Toy Story 3. I don't remember fucking shit about what else happens in that movie.
That's like Andy's going to college and he's like getting rid of the toys and he's like having to decide like, oh, what am I gonna do about this? And it's like, I'm gonna put them in the attic, but he stupidly puts them in a trash bag and his mom confuses it and so she like puts it out with the trash.
Okay.
And then like they get donated to a preschool or whatever and then they get played with all mean and thrown around the room. And like, this sucks. We were abandoned, and then like they try and get out, and then they end up in a fucking dump. If they like fucking brave little toaster it, where it's like they're literally like going into an incinerator, and they like give up. They just fucking give up. They're like holding hands and like, well, I guess we're dying now.
I kind of remember the incinerator scene actually. Now that you bring it up, that's right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so it's
but
just like
you didn't do 4?
I haven't watched 4. No,
Okay.
I've never seen 4. I actually hadn't seen 3.
Oh, you hadn't even seen 3. Okay.
But that shit's dark. I didn't like that. I mean, it made me feel things. I think that was the goal.
Okay.
But I didn't like it. I didn't like the feelings I had. But yeah, I recommend that other video I talked about, not Toy Story 3.
Okay. Do you want to hear about what I did on my birthday?
Didn't you build a computer?
No, it came a few days early. So I built it on Saturday and was like, oh shit, I'm supposed to be doing a thing with my family. Oops.
Okay, well, what'd you do?
I went to the Portland Japanese Garden up in Washington Park.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, a Japanese tea garden.
That's nice.
It's very pretty.
Do you have pictures?
I do have some pictures. Do you want me to send you some pictures?
I'm going to put them on the video version of the podcast, and it's going to completely betray the whole concept of this.
Oh, no! I'll send you some pictures.
Your fault.
I'll send you a handful.
Yeah, I'd like to see that.
Cool.
I'll play some, like, moving music, and I'll put some pictures here.
Ooh, pretty.